This week, something a little different. Meet a friend of mine whose name you may never have heard of, but who has stories you'll never forget. One story dates back to her job pulling cables on the very first broadcast of a little show called Saturday Night Live. That's next on Brio TV, the podcast. Well, hey there, hi there, ho there. You're as welcome as can be to this special episode. I'm Bill Brio, and I want you to meet a friend I've known for 40 years now. I just teased in the opening that one of her first jobs was pulling cables at Studio 8H in Rockefeller Plaza while working for NBC as part of the crew on opening night in 1975 of Saturday Night Live. Now, that's a timely story, given how SNL is celebrating 50 seasons with this fall's broadcast. There's also a new movie by Jason Reitman about the hours leading up to that first premiere. And we'll find out if it really seemed as fraught with drama as Reitman's film suggests. As cool as that story is, my guest went on to an even more starry adventures in television and beyond, especially after leaving her native New York and moving to California, where she rose through the ranks to the top executive offices at the Walt Disney Company. I'm talking about Lorraine Santoli, who I first met on a Disneyland press junket in 1984. It was the first of many incredible press events I was fortunate to attend. As an animation buff, Lorraine introduced me to Roy Disney as well as several of Disney's so-called 9 old men, the veteran animators who worked on several of Disney's classic features, going all the way back to Snow White. When she was growing up, Lorraine was even more into the Mickey Mouse Club on television, and several of the original Mouseketeers became her best friends, including Annette Funicello and Bobby Burgess. Now, there are many, many more stories to tell, including her incredible celebrity autograph collection, her side angle as a best-selling author, and a scary story about Pam Grier that I never knew until this conversation. Please give a warm Disney welcome to Lorraine Santoli. Live from New York, I'm speaking with Lorraine Santoli, and it's such a pleasure. Lorraine, how are you today?
I'm good, Bill, and it's so good to see you again.
Yeah, man, it was fun back in the day. Lorraine and I, when I was writing for TV Guide Canada and other folks, was were you the head of publicity for Disneyland, I think, at that point. Were you, Lorraine?
At that point, yeah.
Yeah. So you went on to have this spectacular career at Disney in working with during the years of the great renaissance of animation and the theme parks. So we'll touch on that a bit later. But as you know, it's the 50th season of Saturday Night Live. It's shocking. And here we are. This landmark show that Lorne Michaels, I haven't been drinking this morning. Lorne Michaels is still piloting, so that's pretty amazing. So I want to talk a bit about that, Lorraine, and tell me. I know you told me this years ago, and I never forgot it. But what brought you to be there then? Were you hired by NBC? What was the story of you actually being involved in the early days of Saturday Night Live?
Well, I actually started working for NBC in 1968, believe it or not.
That's impossible. That's impossible.
It's totally
posing for baby pictures. What were you doing?
Yeah, I was right out of high school, by the way. You know,
you must have. Yeah.
And anyway, I started there doing secretarial work, but then I moved on to audience research, and I was there from 68 to 78. But my goal was always to work in production. As a kid, I collected autographs, and I probably have about 200 or 300, maybe 300. Unbelievable people, by the way, and each one gotten right in front of me that I got. So it's like 100% real. But anyway, I was always...
Let me get this straight, Lorraine. So did you say 1968 that you started there or at NBC?
Yeah.
So this is during the time that Johnny Carson is doing the Tonight Show
That is
at
correct. I
30
remember his
Rockefeller.
office on the seventh floor on at 30 Rock, and I always worked at 30 Rock.
Wow.
And so, but I collected the autographs when I was 12 and 13 years old, something like that, with a partner in crime. We both did. But anyway, so my dream, was to work at NBC, because I had spent so many years, in the downstairs by the elevators there at 30 Rock, waiting for celebrities going in and out which of course I couldn't go into those elevators. You had to have a pass or whatever. So spending time in that area, and I thought how wonderful it would be to be able to walk through and get on those elevators, because I belong here. And so I did. And so I ended up at NBC, as I said, secretary first and then audience research. But I was always geared toward production. That's what I wanted to do. And
kind of ironic that your route to the top was through an elevator. Like that, you
was through that special elevator. That's right. And so I wanted to do that. And my office, and I ultimately did, which was my way to Saturday Night Live. But I used to be in an office actually on the 8th floor there at Studio 8H, which is where they do Night Live from. So it was kind of just down the hall. So I would, before the show ever began, when they were still planning for it, I'd wander into 8H and, see what was going on. It was interesting because I remember, at least on that first show, which I ultimately worked on, they were building these sets for the Muppets.
Wow.
And, there were Muppets on.
They were part of Saturday Night Live. Yeah.
They were part of Saturday Night Live. But at any rate, it was at that time I wanted to switch over to production. So I guess the first Saturday Night Live was 1975.
Right.
So it must have been somewhere in there, or maybe even a year or so earlier, that I did make my way into production, and ultimately as a camera person, believe it or not. And that was the 70s, where there were very few, if any, women doing that kind of thing. And I thought that was that was like my ultimate dream. So it was during that chapter of my life where I was in production for about a year, not very long, because it didn't turn out to be what I thought it was cracked up to be for me.
Right.
It wasn't being as creative as you think you can be. I mean, you're just taking direction from a director in the control room who says, move right, go here, close up there, whatever it is. But in order even to get to the camera part, I had to be a cable puller.
Right.
And that was pulling the cables around for the camera people.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And I was assigned the first Saturday Night Live.
Wow.
But I used to see those people, even when I was in my office there before I went to production, I used to see them walking up and down the hall all the time. And it was, of course, the original cast. Yeah. But who knew who they were,
Who knew that the original not ready for primetime players. And of course, this new movie by Jason Reitman, Saturday Night, was just shown at the Toronto International Film Festival, and it depicts, I think, the 90 minutes prior to the green light going on and the show premiering. But so I don't.
I didn't somebody hire me. I was there.
They should have. Well, yes, we've done this. We should have done this podcast earlier. Because I haven't seen the film yet, but I talked to a colleague from The Sun who had, and it basically depicts the frenzy and the peril of this not happening. That people really didn't have the NBC executives. They probably looked at Lorne Michaels and thought, "What the hell does this kid from Toronto know?"
He was young.
Yeah, and all these guys who were radical-looking hippies that were going to put on this show. But was that your impression? Did it seem like a shaky start, or did it look like they all knew what they were doing?
No, it didn't seem like a shaky start to me. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was there during rehearsals and stuff like that. And somehow in my mind, I have an image of Chevy Chase on a ladder. I don't know why, but I remember that.
Yeah.
And the Muppet set. But no, I mean, as on the production end, I didn't really have any sense that, I mean, I don't remember anybody going, oh, no, what are we doing? We can't do that. I don't
Yeah.
recall any of that at all. And maybe
Wow.
because I was doing my own little thing. But no, it all seemed fine. It seemed smooth. I think it went well. And who knew where it was going to go?
No
I'm sure
kidding.
the primetime players on the show, it was the first time they were doing this, and it was live, of course.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure they were all, very nervous, but everybody was prepared. I mean,
Yeah.
I think they were.
And who was the first host? I think was that George Carlin or
It was
Candace?
George Carlin.
George
It
Carlin?
was George
Yeah.
Carlin.
Do you recall at all? I mean, you were so focused on your job, I'm sure, but the audience, were they boisterous? Was the reaction pretty immediate to what was happening?
No. I mean, I think, because nobody knew what Saturday Night Live was.
Right.
My guess is they had to pull people off the street. I mean, truly, in New
Wow.
York, they used to
Yeah, that's true.
hand out tickets on the street and stuff way back then for a lot of game shows, Password and the Match Game and this, that, and the other thing, some of which were done at 30 Rock.
Wow.
And so I'm guessing that they probably handed out to other than people. I'm sure there were a lot of people there who were relatives of the cast, of the producer and so
That's
on.
true. Yeah.
But I'm thinking probably a good portion of the audience just were really given tickets to see this new show, is my guess.
Yeah. Do you have any impression of some of the individuals, like Dan Aykroyd, is from Ontario originally, Ottawa, I think. He seemed to blossom pretty much from the start. Or who stood out? Belushi or Gilda Radner?
Well, just personally to me,
Yeah.
It was Gilda Radner.
Right.
I thought she was so funny. And I never saw, I mean, I was there on that first show, and I ultimately did a couple of other shows, but I wasn't like a regular on that crew, but I did a couple. I remember actually doing one that was based on Mary Hartman.
Right.
Do you remember that show? Right.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Louise
Lasser.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And they gave everybody in the audience wigs to wear with braids, because that's
That is hilarious. That's very cool.
It's hilarious. And there's actually, while it was in its heyday, there's a book, a Saturday Night Live book. There's probably more than one now, but it was a very much a picture book that looked almost script-like, with things written in the margins and stuff like that. But there's a whole bunch of pictures in there, and I think I'm in 2 of them.
Oh, cool.
And I think one, I could be wrong, but I seem to recall one, and it's in a crowd picture, but with the braids.
Oh, we got to see that. You got to.
I think it's in there. I 100%, but I'm pretty sure I remember that.
Before you pack everything away, make sure you.
Yeah, and that one has probably been either packed away or thrown away. My guess is I packed it away because I knew what was in it.
Hope so.
And so anyway, but my memories are very much on the production end, but I never saw, because you're there, I never saw any animosity. I never saw any yelling. I never saw any of that kind of stuff. It seemed people were just there to do their job. And the group was friendly, because when I used to see them coming down the hall when I was in my other office, they seemed to always be a group. It seemed to be 4 or 5 of them together.
Right.
Always walking down the hall to 8H.
Do you recall? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, I was going to say.
No, you go ahead. Yeah.
There were always strange goings on in that. I remember walking down that hallway one day and heading toward 8H, and there was a camel in the middle of the.
Wow.
And you never knew what you were going to see down there by that studio.
That's funny.
Because it was what it was.
Wow. Was there oddly scented smoke coming from some of the rooms, perhaps, at that time?
No, because I think the dressing rooms, they might have been on the floor below or above. It wasn't right there. So, no, but I suspect that could be, yes.
Could have been. Do you recall who the NBC executives were at that time?
Oh my gosh, Bill. I don't.
Yeah, I don't
really
either.
don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. I remember, Lorne Michaels very much because he was a cutie pie. He was young,
Huh.
and he was attractive. And I think I had a friend, thinking back, who dated him for a while.
Well, I'm going to be talking to Rosie Schuster, who lives in Toronto and was one of the original. Was with Lorne Michaels at the time, I think, married to him for a while. And her father was a legendary comic, part of a great Canadian team, Wayne and Schuster. So,
I remember Wayne and Schuster.
Do you? I used to be on the Ed Sullivan Show a lot.
I used to be on the Ed Sullivan Show. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So, going to be curious to talk to her, but that is amazing. Don't go away. We'll be right back with Lorraine Santoli.
Around here it's called a Parson Blues.
Time once again to speak with Emily Gagne from Hollywood Suite. Emily, what have you got for us this month?
Well, I don't know if you've heard, Bill, but it's back to school season, but also back to sports season. So we've got some of the most iconic sports films in movie history back on the channel.
Listen, I hope you have Bull Durham. That's one thing I want to see.
Oh my gosh, we do have Bull Durham, one of the best. But we also have Ron Shelton's White Man Can't Jump. We've also got Karate Kid. We've got Talladega Nights, if you're into NASCAR.
Very good. Those are great films. What else have you got?
Well, if you're not into sports, we can go in a musical direction. We've got September soundtracks. So these are iconic films that have great music in it. So it could be a musical like Funny Girl, or it could be, just a movie that has great music all over it. Yeah.
Well, that's a terrific lineup, Emily, all this month on Hollywood Suite. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you, Bill.
Hi, movie lovers. Bill Brio here with news of another TV on Film party screening coming to the Westdale Theatre in Hamilton. The end of October means Halloween, right? The Westdale has programmed the original Ghostbusters as a Saturday afternoon feature. See it in a big theater. Come before the feature, however, and starting at 1 p.m. on October 26, I'll be showing some classic cartoons on 16mm right on the Westdale's big screen. Among them is The Skeleton Dance, a genuinely creepy gem from 1929. I'll also be showing some horror movie trailers, including one from Psycho and another from Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy. As a bonus, come and see a film I made way back in high school. Want to see a film where King Kong climbs up the CN Tower? Come and see Second Banana. Catch the shorts, answer trivia questions, win prizes. Then stick around and watch Ghostbusters, all for the same price. That's Saturday, October 26, 1 p.m. at Hamilton's historic Westdale Theatre. Go to thewestdale.ca for tickets and information. Well, here she is again, Lorraine Santoli. Now, and I'm just fascinated by everything 30 Rock at that time. You mentioned you worked on other shows. What else? I mean, when you mentioned that what was that great show with Gene Rayburn?
Match Game.
Match Game. See, I would have been out of my mind to sit in the Match Game audience. That would have been amazing.
I can tell you how many I went to myself as a kid.
Yeah.
And before I was working there.
Yeah.
And Match Game, I'm trying to think what other ones were there. There were several. I loved it when I was there, and I would walk along the hallway on the 7th floor because that's where Johnny Carson's office was.
Wow.
And the door was always open, but he had an outer area where his secretary that he had for a very long time, his assistant, she had blonde hair, I remember. And occasionally you would see him walking up and down the hall, and he was right near the commissary. So you always had a
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. And I remember not far from where his office was, there was a big glass look-in area that was almost like the inside of a furniture store because they had all the latest RCA color TVs.
It's wild.
And and as an employee, you could get a great discount, right?
Oh, did you buy an RCA TV? Oh, good for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
They have a TV museum in Toronto. It's called TVMZ, and I was there yesterday, and it is the largest collection of pre-war televisions, like John Baird in Scotland made mechanical sets in the 20s and 30s. And they have the Felix the Cat statue that was the first image when
really?
TV was broadcast. And they have the TV from the World's Fair in 1939. It's an amazing collection. Yeah. So they probably have quite a few RCA sets in there as well.
Well, I, like you, was a TV baby. I mean, I especially of the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
And my parents, when I was a baby, had this. They were like the first on the block with the television.
Yeah.
And they had a big television with a really small screen, and it was a Dumont.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Wow. And did they have like a magnifier in front of it to make the image seem bigger?
No, it was big enough to see, but it was not big, So
that is so cool.
But TV was one of the reasons I collected, autographs. But during my tenure at NBC doing the camera stuff, I ultimately did do camera. And not on Saturday Night Live, but I did pull cables on Saturday Night Live on a couple of episodes. And I remember for some reason standing back there pulling cables, standing next to like Elizabeth Montgomery. She must have been, it must have been in the height of Bewitched or something. And maybe she was the hostess. And I think I told you that later on in my career, when I was working for Disney, I did a bunch of publicity tours with various celebrities and for various movies or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I was on a tour with Pam Grier, who was in something Like Comes.
Yeah.
Pam and I were together for 3 weeks, just the two of us.
Wow.
Traveling every day on an airplane across this country, except for the weekends. The first weekend, she wanted to land somehow, how the tour was planned, to be in New York, and which is where I came from and my family was.
Right.
So she told me, though, she was going to go to Saturday, because I was going to stay with my parents that weekend. She was at a hotel city, but she said, I'm going to Saturday Night Live on Saturday night, this Saturday, because she and Eddie Murphy shared the same agent or manager. I think it was manager. And she asked me if I wanted to go.
Wow.
And I thought, well, this would be cool. I mean, I actually worked on this show. I mean, it would be fun to go. So she invited me to go, which I did. And I went with her. And we went backstage afterwards for her to talk to Eddie Murray and, have some laughs, whatever. And it was laughs. Somehow I remember him laying on a divan type of thing, laying down.
Yeah.
And but anyway, he was very cordial and very nice. But that was a nice little episode. And I saw some of the production people I had worked with.
They were still there.
That show regularly. So especially camera people. So it was kind of fun for me in that way. And for her, it was kind of fun for Eddie Murphy, although that was fun for me too. But so I was able to go back there as a viewer or an audience member. Mm-hmm. Versus when I was pulling cables around.
Oh, what an opportunity. And my God, to do it with Pam Grier. Holy smokes.
She was the best, by the way. Nice.
That's lovely to hear. I mean, Jackie Brown, I think, is still my favorite Tarantino film. And all those crazy movies she made in the early 70s. Oh, my God.
Oh, my God.
Quite the sex symbol.
I was with her on this tour when it was Academy Award night. We were in New Orleans. And we were in a hotel, and the host for that Academy Awards was Richard Pryor. And she did a whole thing with Richard Pryor, if you read her book. And so I went to her room.
Yeah.
And she had a suite. I had a room, but it was fine.
Yeah.
And we did what we called the lobster run, and we went down the French Quarter and found a seafood restaurant and bought lobsters and everything to eat for dinner in front of her TV, watching Richard Pryor. And she'd tell me stories as we were watching. She'd say, "Oh, see that watch he's wearing? I gave him that watch."
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. So, but we traveled, just the two of us, every day on an airplane. We got along famously.
That's amazing.
Because she's gorgeous and she was wonderful, sweet, kind person.
Oh, lovely to hear. Yeah.
Yeah. Because if you know me pretty well, and me and Pam got along, got along great. I have a strange story. This doesn't fit into Saturday Night Live, but when we were on tour, so after the weekend in New York, we continued we went from LA sort of to the East Coast, up the East Coast, got to New York, and then started traveling across the middle of the country. And it was set for her for the second weekend, because this was like a 3-week thing. On the second weekend, she wanted to be sure we were in Denver. And the reason being because her family, she lived in a suburb outside of Denver. So she wanted to stay with her family that weekend, which she did. And I stayed at the Brown Palace Hotel, which of course is the Molly Brown hotel. It's an old, wonderful hotel. Anyway, come Monday morning, we were out again in Denver the whole day for interviews. We had a driver and a limousine and all that stuff. And I had an agenda, and we went from this place to that place. Okay. So in the morning, she's telling me she didn't feel too well. And I said, what's the matter? And she was not a complainer. And she said she had a stomach ache, or she was really not feeling well. As it turned out, her mom, what a wonderful lady, by the way, her mom was an administrator at a local big hospital. And I said, well, why don't we have a little time? Why don't we just stop over there in the emergency? Maybe they'll give you something. Call your mom. Maybe we can. And so she finally agreed to that. And thank goodness we had the time. Thank God we were not on an airplane. And so we get there, and her mom was there to meet us. And immediately upon stepping out of the car, she was like collapsing. And they put her in a wheelchair and brought her inside. And then they called me in after a while, and they were ready to she was bleeding.
Oh my God.
And inside, and her blood pressure had plummeted, and they had to do exploratory surgery. And so immediately, and here she is now laying in the emergency room.
My God.
With me standing there, and it's like, Lorraine, what's happening? I said, I don't know, but thank God your mother is here. So don't worry, everything will be fine. And before I knew it, she's off to surgery. And turns out she had some sort of a burst ovarian cyst, I think it was.
Oh my God. Wow.
But the point was, she was bleeding. Had we been on an airplane, I swear, Bill, I don't know if she would have survived. She might have bled out.
Well,
and
I was thinking she was in good hands with you even before you told this story. This is, you saved her life. This is incredible. So,
well, she used to say that to me. She said, this is Lorraine. She saved my life.
Yeah.
And
True.
So, and of course, everything went well, which was great. And then I had to deal with some press in Denver, because they had found out she was in the hospital there, and told them what was wrong, and she was doing fine. She was in the hospital for about 5 or 6 days, I think. I think I stayed with her for about 2 days, but then Disney, said to me, Lorraine, you got to come back. Because tour is over, and it all. So, but I remember sitting with her overnight in the hospital the first night. I mean, her family, they weren't there overnight, but her family, brother, sister, all that stuff came. Wonderful family. And I just sat in a chair, it's like one of those movies. Somebody's in the bed, like sick, and you're sitting in the chair, just, being with them. And so I did that. And but anyway, she, of course, I left, and she got well, thankfully. And when she came back, we got her this gigantic stuffed Mickey. I mean, a people-sized stuffed. And it was in the back of the limousine, and we picked her up. I did at the airport.
Awesome. Yeah.
With that. And so she always used to say, Lorraine saved my life. But
it's true. Well, good for you.
Thank God her mother was there, her family right there.
Wonderful.
So it's just one of those things, it wasn't super serious as it turned out, but she was bleeding internally.
What a story. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I should mention now to switch gears entirely.
Yes, please.
Just going back further, you mentioned how we were both raised on television, watching everything we could in the early days. And I know that I should mention that you're also an author. You've written several books. One of them is the best book on the Mickey Mouse Club, and it was, I'm sure, a show. And Lorraine, you don't seem old enough to have seen it originally. Did you see it in reruns? How did you have come across it?
I saw it originally.
Did you? Okay, wow.
Yeah, I was a little girl,
Yes,
but I remember that. I remember it so well because I was a devoted fan of the show as a little kid, and made sure I watched it every day. I had my favorite, which was Annette, as many people did. And I remember saying to my mother, I really remember this, saying, I want to be a Mouseketeer. So she helped me, write a little thing, because maybe I was 5 or something, and to get an autographed picture of Annette sent, we to the Disney studio. And I still have that autographed picture. And
sure you do.
And it was like a stamped one, but they had a fan mail department at the time. And so it's really weird that you never know where your life is going to go. So,
it's
as
incredible.
as a kid watching that show so devotedly, I mean, I lived out my fantasy as far as the Mickey Mouse Club and the Mouseketeers as an adult.
Well, you were one of her best friends. I mean, and I must say,
I was.
I was the great fortune, thanks to you, to interview Annette Funicello at her house in the hills in Hollywood. And you set all that up, and sadly, she'd already had a diagnosis. But she was very healthy when I talked to her that day.
Yeah.
We had a wonderful time. She was very funny, actually. I remember some of the stories.
Yeah, she had a great sense of humor.
Yeah, it was really cool to meet her. Lovely, lovely person.
Lovely person.
Yeah, and for you to have watched her on television, she must have been such an inspiration, even, as a child, to see her career and how she was the breakout star of that show, right?
Yeah, she was the breakout star of that show. And, in the first season of the Mickey Mouse Club, there were 24 original Mouseketeers. And she was literally the last one to be chosen. And she was chosen by Walt Disney. He happened to see her in there's a place called the Starlight Bowl, or was, in Burbank. And they used to put on various productions. And she was in a dancing school as a ballet dancer. She was young. And I think it was Swan Lake even. And so anyway, he happened to be in that audience that night, and where she was performing it. And he looked at her, and said, I want to talk to that girl, about the Mickey Mouse Club. And then she came in and auditioned, I guess, as I recall. And she was the 24th and last Mouseketeer chosen.
Wow.
And the only one chosen by Walt Disney himself, as far as I know.
He was a pretty good casting agent.
I guess.
What a story. I have to tell you, too, a friend of mine, a priest, was just retired, Father John Kroll. He collected every single Disney DVD and all the ones that were in the tin boxes. And he gave me a couple. I'm sure you have them. And it's the Spinnin' Marty's and the Annette one. Yeah. And I watched for the first time the Spinnin' Marty, which was a little like a 15-minute show within a show.
Right.
My goodness, they hold up. They're pretty darn dramatic and suspenseful. And if you were a youngster back then, you would have been locked on that show, right?
Oh, I was, Tim Considine and David Stollery.
Yeah.
Who, of course, became part of my Mouseketeer troupe as well.
Yeah.
And Yeah, I mean, I watched, and of course there was an Annette series too, and there were,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of though also educational things on the Mickey Mouse Club, and there were segments about kids from all over the world and how they, raced little cars or how the
Yeah.
weather worked or whatever it was. So you actually absorbed quite a bit of interesting educational information when you were a kid watching that show, because the Mouseketeers were segments on the show along with like Spin and Marty, and then they had the cartoon of the day,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. So it was interesting the way the show was put together, and it was a huge hit when it
Oh, yeah.
first
It was
came
so
on.
so well produced. And then later, years later, you're hosting 25th, 30th anniversary
Yeah.
gatherings with the original Mouseketeers at Disneyland, and with your buddy Bobby Burgess there front and center, and Sherry Alberoni, and everyone
Yeah.
else. That had to have been a thrill to have those gatherings, right?
Yeah, and with a handful of them, like it was really Bobby and Tommy and Sherry and Sharon, Cheryl, Doreen, Darlene. Those were the group. But even with and Cubby, even in that, and Karen, it was, I got close to a lot of. They're still some of my best friends, and Sherry being my best friend in the world.
Yeah.
And I talk to her several times a week, but I'm in touch with them all the time because I was so compatible with them,
Yeah.
and went through so much with them,
Yeah.
so many shows, so many events, so many trips, and when you think back on it, and here you were, a little kid in Brooklyn, New York, watching this show, and grew up to be the Mouseketeer mom almost. And I had a jacket that said Mouseketeer mascot.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And yeah, because they were wonderful, they're great people. And of course, everybody's, really getting up there in
Yeah.
years. We've lost quite a few. And, but the ones that are here that I was always friendly with, I still am.
Amazing. Yeah. And some folks will remember Bobby from the Lawrence Welk show. He continued to dance, and he's still pretty spry, I understand.
He's still very spry. And I think I said to you, Bobby's always been, his personality is such that he's like a kid at heart.
Yeah.
I mean, he would go to Disneyland. I think he's 82 or 83. I'm not sure.
Wow.
And, go to Disneyland today and still want to, just head to Space Mountain. I mean, and he's got a bunch of grandkids, and, they have fun at Disneyland. But he is a guy and always known for his smile, who always had that kind of a smile, on his face. I never saw Bobby get angry, ever. And believe me, I spent much time with him.
Yeah.
And he just, he's so easygoing, but he's like a kid, he's like a kid.
And confirm or deny, I have a memory you told me or something that his neighbor in L.A. was a famous rock star.
His neighbor was Ricky Nelson.
Oh, okay. But didn't he also live near Frank Zappa?
Maybe he told you that, and maybe that's so, but I don't remember that.
But his neighbor otherwise was Ricky Nelson.
Yeah, he had a Ricky Nelson. And then after he passed away and the house changed hands, it got divided because it was big. I think there were a number of acres into smaller parcels. But yeah.
I just think when I heard the first rumor, that's America. How, imagine Bobby Burgess living next door to Frank Zappa. That's the
Yeah, isn't that an odd? Yeah.
Pretty hilarious.
Yeah, because he lives up there in the Hollywood Hills, and it's
good
nice.
For him. Good for him. And I'm curious too. You mentioned you gathered all these autographs when you were a very young girl, 12, 13. And that would have been a golden age of showbiz at passing through 30 Rock. Who are some of the people's names that you have on autograph?
Oh my gosh, oldies but goodies. I mean, some of the great ones are, like Frank Sinatra and, Ella Fitzgerald. I'm trying to think now. There's so many.
Wow.
Well, I wanted to like group some of them because they were people who went together.
Right.
And like an 8x10 picture and the autographs on the bottom. So when I mentioned Sinatra, I have the whole Rat Pack. So I have Sinatra,
What?
Sarah Lawford, Joey Bishop, Sammy Davis Jr., and yeah, so I have the whole Rat Pack, and I have like Johnny Carson and Ed McMahon, like Steve Lawrence and Eddie Gourmet, Sonny and Cher, those kind of things. That I have Lucille Ball and Vivian Vance.
Oh.
And I mean, Bill, if I had my list in front of me,
yeah,
to tell you,
that's a pretty good list, Lorraine. I don't think you have to dig any further.
Yeah, no, I mean, but there's so many more people who passed away. Burt Lancaster.
Oh my goodness,
Hudson. On and on and on, like big stars.
Wow, I don't know if you listen to podcasts much, but the Lucille Ball's daughter. Put together the radio broadcast Lucy did.
Let me interrupt you. I listened to most of them, and
Same
I love.
Yeah, isn't that a wonderful time capsule?
So different.
Yeah, yes, she's a pretty good interviewer. Like her questions were very direct. I love those podcasts. I was glad that Lucy Arnaz did that. It was a wonderful window into that world.
Them.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. More with my pal Lorraine after these short messages. Well, once again, there's a mountain of entertainment for the whole family on Paramount Plus. That's certainly true this month. Not only is Frasier back in the building, but so is Stallone, Dora, and several other favorites. Frasier's sophomore season will see the good doctor return to his radio roots in Seattle for an episode featuring old friends Bulldog Briscoe, Gil Chesterton, and super agent B.B. Glazier. The fun begins September 19th. On Tulsa King, mob capo Dwight Manfredi, played by Sylvester Stallone, locks horns with neighboring gangsters from the Kansas City mob. Does it all begin September 15th? Absolutely. On the shot in Nova Scotia horror series From, new strangers wander into the nightmarish town, including Canadian cast members Robert Joy and Samantha Brown. Season 3 begins September 22nd. Finally, Paramount Plus's preschool favorite Dora returns for a second season September 13th. Looking for a streaming service with something for every member of the family? Subscribe now to Paramount Plus. Here's what's heating up the Super Channel schedule this September. Heart and Home premieres Someone Like You. The feature is based on the New York Times bestseller from Karen Kingsbury. After the tragic loss of his best friend, a grieving young architect launches a search for her secret twin sister. The film stars former Degrassi player Sarah Fisher. Another premiere is Devil's Peak, airing on Super Channel Fuse. This is about an 18-year-old who tries to escape his meth-dealing kingpin father and long-suffering mother to run off with the girl of his dreams. You can probably guess which character Billy Bob Thornton plays. Robin Wright also stars. Plus, there are more new episodes of Troppo, the shot in New Zealand series about an eccentric private eye hired to search for a missing tech pioneer. Thomas Jane stars. And remember, Super Channel, an all-Canadian company, is available via most cable providers across the country, as well as streaming live and on demand with Amazon Prime Video channels, Apple TV Plus, and Fubo. And we're back. Oh my goodness. So you would go to see Match Game and all these other things. Any other memories of shows that you watched in the studio audience in that time?
Well, it was a lot of game shows. There were a lot of game shows in New York at the time. There was sort of basics, right? Autograph basics in New York. I was a kid and I had a partner in crime, my friend Rochelle. And we would go into the city because we lived in Brooklyn. Yeah. We'd go to the city every weekend because that was the Saturday matinee day. And a lot of some of these stars were on Broadway.
Yeah.
And so we'd hang out and the Ed Sullivan Show, which was live on Sunday, but they rehearsed on Saturday. And so in and out of the stage door would come some very big stars, as you had on his show all the time. And then we would hang out at stage doors, and then I think it might have been the game shows were more during the week, so it must have been days we had off from school or whatever. But like I have Alan Ludden's autograph, Gene Rayburn autograph, all those hosts. But I used to go to those shows all the time. But the Broadway ones were fun, and one of the toughest ones autographs to get, but I did get it, was Barbra Streisand, and that was in Funny Girl. She was in Funny Girl. That's
amazing.
How 1963 or something.
Oh my goodness.
And, actually, the autograph is Barbra Streisand on one side, and on the back side is Sidney Chaplin, because he was her the male lead on Broadway. And so I have a frame thing here of Streisand and Chaplin and the original Funny Girl playbill.
Oh my goodness! Wow, that's got to be worth something. That's pretty cool.
The strange thing was Streisand, and she was not known to be the sweetest of people, but she was fine. She signed the autograph, and she was with Elliot Gould. The thing was who she was married to at the time. It was at the Winter Garden Theater in New York, which the front part of the Garden is actually on Broadway. The stage doors around the corner on 7th Avenue.
Okay.
So after the show, she would often leave the building from the front.
Oh,
so
sneaky.
Sneaky. And that's where I got the autograph. But I was standing in the lobby once at the Winter Garden when that show was there. And so there's a guy, there must have been a telephone thing in there. And guy is talking on the phone, can't help but overhear him. And he's talking, yeah, you can talk to her. Here's her dressing room phone number. And he repeated out loud, phone number. Of course, I committed it to memory, right? So, and I'm very bold as a young kid.
Right. Good for you.
So I used to like to do artwork and draw. So I had this pencil drawing I had done of her in a scene from Funny Girl.
Wow.
And I framed it. And I said, I wanted to give it to her. Now, how was I going to get it to her? Well, I'll call her up.
Wow. That's hilarious.
So I did. The first thing she said to me, she picked up the phone. The first thing she said to me, where did you get this number? And I said, well, there was this man in the, lobby talking. There was a man in the lobby. And I said, yes. And he, and she says, you cannot give this number to anybody or else I'm going to have to go through the trouble of changing it. And I said, no, I'm not going to give it to anybody. I promise I won't, which I didn't. And I just told her I had this picture and whatever. And so what happened, I mean, I didn't get to hand it to her face to face, but she did send somebody down to take it and, bring it up. I never heard another thing, but it was funny. So, I mean, I was like, so I just, well, I'll call her up.
That's wild. You're so smart. I think back in those days, the show What's My Line taped in the Ed Sullivan Theater as well, did it?
A little before my time.
Okay, that does going back quite a ways. And I guess so a little before your time would have been an Ed Sullivan show in February of 1964 with a rock group from Liverpool.
Yeah, I remember that. I mean, I went to the city. I think they were staying at the Regency Hotel. And of course, there were huge crowds outside the Regency and, hoping to get a glimpse, which I did not. But yes, I was around in that time.
I was happened to be in New York, I guess, in 2014, and they had rechanged the marquee which was still Letterman, to look like the night that the Beatles were there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they had it all with what's her name, Tessie O'Shea, or the.
Oh yeah, I remember her.
Yeah, she shared, and they had her name up there next to the Beatles, like it was sort of like the two headliners are,
Yes,
So,
exactly. They had a very convenient. No, we knew all the convenient stage doors.
yeah, I bet.
And Ed Sullivan Theater was one because it was just right around the corner there,
Yeah.
and they go in and out that way. That was, and
Right.
so many big. The other thing, tied to NBC with autographs is that they, to this day, have a huge facility in Brooklyn. And it was at the time when they started doing color that it was the place to do color shows. Very big studio there. And it was within walking distance of where I lived. And so me and my partner, Rochelle, we'd go over there all the time, autograph collecting, because they did things like the Perry Como show.
Oh,
Hullabaloo, Hallmark Hall of Fame, big shows, right?
yeah.
Big stars. And so we'd walk over there. Maybe it was a mile or two from where, but we'd walk in the winter, in the snow, in the sun. And the doors into this studio were big glass. It was a big glass thing and glass doors. You could see in very well. You just stand there. You could see people walking by, famous people. I remember walking into that lobby and Kate Smith. You remember?
Wow.
Kate?
Yeah, of course. God bless America.
God bless America. She must have been on the Perry Como show, I guess, or something. And she was on the phone there and she was saying, I don't know what information she was trying to get, but it was like information. And she said, "This is Kate Smith. I'd like to get what it is." And then there was silence. And then she said, "Yes, the Kate Smith."
Who else could it be? That's hilarious.
Yeah, but the point was, for years, I looked into those doors and like the elevator and couldn't, I would go in a little, when you first walked in, you could walk in there, but you couldn't go up where the studio was. And there was a guy who ran the place who was the building. He was very nice to us because we were there all the time. And so anyway, one of the first things I did in production when I was at NBC that they sent me, they would assign you every week to different things, was doing Another World, which was a soap opera.
Yeah.
That was their regular.
Yeah.
And so I actually had to go there to work. This place that I had stood outside in the heat and the cold and everything for years. And so I was so excited when I got to go there that I had driven to the city that day to 30 Rock and my car was in an outdoor parking lot. And I was like in the Twilight Zone. Okay. I was like, I couldn't believe I was being assigned to go there. And so I'm walking along and I get to an open parking lot. And they have one of these things that go up and down.
Yeah.
I was paying no attention and I walked under it and it hit me right in the head.
Oh.
Down, boom, on my head.
Oh my God.
I heard like the bells of Big Ben with the sound of Ben in my head, like a boom. And thank goodness I was okay. But it was like so, enamored of the fact that I was going to get to go there.
Wow.
And so I was there many times for Another World. But anyway, a lot of my best autographs came from there. I remember Judy Garland, which I don't have because she didn't sign it.
Wow.
And was on the Perry Como show, and I actually was in the audience of the show she was on.
Wow.
But she zoomed into the door, tiny person, and she was like, no. Okay. And, she just went in.
Yeah. Wow. What memories. Amazing. Lorraine, I want to quickly ask, we could do 4 or 5 of these, I think, to cover your career.
Yeah, on different topics, the autographs, the this, that.
Hopefully we will do it another, but take me to what brought you to Los Angeles and your career at Disney at the beginning.
And how I met you there.
Yeah.
I was working at NBC. And I was just shy of 10 years there.
Wow.
And I had been to California, again, being so into the entertainment business at the time. And as a kid, this is where I was meant to go, when I grew up.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to write for television, actually. And so a friend of mine at NBC who I worked with, she was also game. We were in our 20s and crazy. And so decided to quit, which we did, and go to LA. And we had been there before. So we got an apartment at Oakwood, you might know, in Burbank.
Famous, yeah.
Yeah. So we got that ahead of time. We had a nice 2-bedroom, beautiful furnished apartment. And so, and of course, coming from Brooklyn for me, moving to a place like that had pools and spas and tennis courts and, all of that, it was like I died and went to heaven. And then I had to, we both did, but had to find a job.
Yeah.
And I didn't have much money with it, and I really did want to write for television. And so I was putting in resumes everywhere, and I thought I would be able to be transferred to NBC in Burbank, but it just never happened. So I drove by the Disney studios one day, not even knowing what it was. And of course, now, they have that huge entrance and everything else. But then it basically had a chain link fence with a little plaque on it that said Walt Disney Productions. I was putting resumes all over town. And so I went in there and I did whatever I did. They needed someone within the marketing sort of publicity area as an assistant. The guy who I'm still friendly with today came down to interview me and hired me. And just like that would never happen today, right? You get hired by committee. You
right.
No, it was instantaneous. And I thought, well, this is good because actually on the same day I was offered a job at KTLA in audience research because I had that in my background. I thought, and the money was about the same. And I thought, I've been in television and stuff. This might be interesting to be in a movie studio. Decided on that one. So it was like a marriage made in heaven. And I was his assistant for about a year or two, I think, less than 2 years. But it was in the midst of all these publicists. It was in the same area. And I saw them all working on sets and writing a lot of stuff, stories and bios and fact sheets and press kits.
So were you working on Dopey Drive and Mickey Lane? You were right on that?
I was not in the animation building, the ROD building, the Roy
Disney building. Okay, where they had the archives downstairs. Yeah, directly across
from the animation building. And so I thought what they were doing looked pretty good.
Yeah.
And so what I wanted to do, but I had to sort of gravitate my way over there. And I talked to, the head of the department, Bob King, who was a very nice guy. And he said, here, I want you to do this. I'm going to give you a script, which at the time was The Rocketeer.
Oh, yeah. Billy Campbell. Not Billy Campbell.
Yeah. And he said, I want you to write a trailer and a deluxe trailer. I didn't even know what that was. I knew what a trailer was, but I didn't know what a deluxe was, just a longer one.
Okay.
And let's see what you can do with that. I worked very hard that weekend, and it was on his desk on Monday morning, whatever I had done. And he gave it to the guy who was the head of the trailer department. And he didn't tell him who wrote it. And so when he talked to the guy afterwards, he said, "These are really good. Who did this?" And then he said, "Well, it was Lorraine." And it was like, wow, who'd have thunk?
Yeah.
So that then moved over to the trailer department.
Nice. Wow.
I wrote trailers for things like reissue of Bambi and, stuff like that. But it was really the publicity stuff that I wanted to do. So there was a guy there who was the head of television publicity. And sometimes films, but mostly television. And he was a one-man band doing television because it was like The Wonderful World of Disney.
Right.
And The Wonderful World of Color, all the different names it had. And so I started helping him write various things. And it became such a help to him that he fought for me to come over so he could have another publicist to work with. And that's how I became a publicist.
Amazing.
And all of that. And it was, a marriage made in heaven, Bill.
Yeah.
And as I got to write, I got to do the whole celebrity thing. I got to travel. And so I did that for television and some movies. And then I decided, then Disney was in the process of changing hands. And they had a couple of different people coming in as CEO that did not work out.
Right.
That was very short periods, but I was there for that.
Mm.
And I didn't like it. I didn't like the way things were going. And I was like, I love traditional Disney, Mickey Mouse and Friends.
Right.
The only place that existed was at the theme park. So I tried to get my way into the publicity at Disneyland, which I did.
Wow.
And I did publicity there for about 6.5 years before coming back to the studio to be director of corporate synergy for the next decade.
Yeah, no kidding.
Basically internal publicity.
When you came to Disneyland, who was running publicity at that point?
Who was doing publicity at that point? Well, running publicity was Bob Roth.
Right.
And he was wonderful, very nice man. Mm-hmm. And I loved Jack Lindquist.
Right. Remember that name? Yeah.
Greatest.
Yeah.
Everybody loved Jack Lindquist. I mean, he came up with the most outrageous, great marketing ideas like, Disney dollars, and on the 30th anniversary, giving away GM cars all year long to, every time a 30,000th guest walked through the gate. We had a great big computer thing outside. It looked like Mickey. That was I forgot what the machine was called, but it was on a computer system.
I remember it.
And, yeah. Every 30th person got some little trinket. Every 300th got something a little bigger. Every 3,000th got something a little bigger. But the 30,000th person of the day, and sometimes it was more than one a day, depending how the computer ran.
Yeah.
And it was totally on the level. And nobody knew, except certain people in operations, how much more before the winner. So the 30,000th guest would get their choice, and we had a parking lot full of GM cars, new ones. And Jack had made a huge deal with General Motors. And here's how we did it. It was so great, Bill. It was so clever. Was that when first of all, we in publicity would be advised by operations when it was coming close to being somebody's going to come in and win.
Yeah.
And so we secretly would go downstairs to the front gate. There was a little stroller shop there, and we'd hide behind the desk or whatever at the stroller. And we'd have a videographer, a photographer, and us just waiting for it to happen because confetti went off and big sounds and everything.
Yeah.
The people who had annual passports got to know that when they saw us,
right,
they knew it was soon.
Start lining up. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So we tried to hide. So the things would go off, and we would run out, and the person would be like, what happened? An immediate interview. They would do the video, talk to them immediately upon it happened. We'd get Mickey Mouse down there really fast. He had a GM car set up with a huge key that Mickey would said Disneyland, would stand in front of, and we'd get the person who won, take pictures with Mickey, with the GM car that was there. Yeah. They could make a choice. But anyway, that GM car, we'd take them up to publicity, and we had a sort of templated press release where we had to fill in the name of the person and where they were from, and that they had just won this car at Disneyland. And we would have the picture developed really fast. We didn't have digital.
Right, of course.
Like FedEx or whatever, with the press release to the local media from wherever that person came from. And we would then have the person up in publicity and get hold of the radio stations. This was immediate in the town. And if they wanted to interview them right off the bat.
So smart.
Things every single day, and sometimes more than once a day. And I had a map of the United States in my office, and I had pins in every place people won a car.
Crazy.
And it was such a brilliant thing, publicity-wise, getting it from little town to little town, or from city to city to city to city, depending on where they came from. So Disneyland was getting publicity every day in different places. which ultimately added up to, I think they gave away that year over 400 cars.
Wow, amazing! And the park was packed the whole time because people wanted to win. And what a brilliant scheme! I have to tell you, I mean, I was working for TV Guide Canada and was so fortunate to meet you and be shepherded into the park so many times that it seemed like for me every time a Disney wish was like, the press were treated so well.
Weren't they though? Yeah.
Oh, like Sandra here called us all pampered show ponies. She was
true.
Because
Quim was taken care of.
It was incredible. It was incredible. Nobody did it like Disney. I remember there was one. I don't know. It was the 35th anniversary. You flew us to Anaheim. We went to Disneyland, and then we got on a chartered jet for the Disney plane to go to Florida, and they did it all again there. Like it was, and there was an event at Disney World, and the people, and it was closed to the public, but there was still 10,000 people there, most of them working press, back when there was working press. And you had Dolly Parton was sitting in front of the World Showcase thing. Gloria Estefan and the Miami Sound Machine were playing in another part, and then the great Buddy Rich Orchestra in one other place, and they were you were wandering around. There was,
it was like top drawer. Do you remember one of the events I never forget with you was the opening of the Grand Floridian Hotel?
Oh, Gloria! You asked us all. We had to send our shoe size and neck size. We get in a room. There's tuxedos. You guys emptied every tuxedo shop in 9 states.
It was from Atlanta to Miami or something.
Yeah.
They rented every black. They were all black tuxedos and shoes, shirt, everything. I remember you wore sneakers. I remember it.
I want to apologize.
No, it was great. And for the men, and then when you got there and you tried it on, or they came in and took your measurements. There was a time you had to be in your room and they actually measured you. Yeah. And then it was in that vast, gorgeous lobby at the Grand Floridian. There were ice statues everywhere, and there were, food and champagne constantly. And then in a helicopter at the back of the hotel flew in Burt Reynolds
and Lonnie Anderson.
And
you had the 7 original Mercury astronauts there at that same event. You had John Glenn and all these guys, and they're in tuxedos, and then out comes Burt and Lonnie. And the reporters are knocking down John Glenn and Lovell and all these other heroes to go to get to see Burt and Lonnie. But what a crazy event! It was amazing. Yeah.
Oh, anyway, it was so fun, and I always remember that event with you, mostly because of your sneakers. And because I liked it. They were black. They were black and white. You know how the old kids'
they were
sneakers.
The checkered sneakers I bought at.
Whatever. It worked.
What was not Manhattan Beach, but the Muscle Beach in Hollywood? Venice Beach. There was a guy who would sell those out of the trunk of his car for $10. So I bought a several pair, and I remember there was a photographer, Mario Casilli, who shot a lot of the best TV Guide covers. Yeah. So when I was first there, I was a photo editor, and so he picked me up in his Rolls Royce, and I get in, and I'm wearing those shoes, and I go, wow, I've never been in a Rolls Royce before, and he goes, well, I've never had somebody with checkered sneakers in my car before. Anyway, those were the days.
Those were the days. Oh my gosh, Bill, when we think back to those times,
incredible.
Really fortunate. At the time, we were there with Disney, and for me, also NBC and Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
And to have had those experiences that are wonderful, wonderful memories. They really are wonderful. I particularly consider myself so very blessed to have grown up and did everything, every fantasy I had about show business and writing and things that I wanted to do, I did.
Yeah.
And not only that, but the Mickey Mouse Club thing, which was a childhood fantasy come true.
Well, Lorraine, thank you very much for sharing those memories today. And We didn't even, I would love to do this again sometime because we didn't even touch on, I think you wrote scripts for the Flintstones. I think you know, we
I did a Hanna-Barbera. It never came to be. It was a pilot thing, but that was another thing. Joseph Barbera was a family sort of connection.
Oh, nice. Wow. That was cool.
It was actually a family connection. And when I visited California once, he took me to dinner at, I forget the name of the Italian restaurant, but it was a well-known Italian restaurant in LA with his family because one of my cousins used to come and visit him all the time and stay at his house. It's a very close, actually, family connection, although I didn't really know him until I met him there, and he was very kind to me. And he gave me the opportunity to write because we're going to do a pilot for a comedy series, and I was able to join the Writers Guild. I got paid for that work.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
The series came off, but it was fun.
I got to interview him, so I don't know if that was something you helped to set up even, but I remember really how generous he was with his time and how wonderful it was to talk to him back in the day. But, you know, and also people should know you've written several books. You've written the book on corporate synergy that is a great guide and insights into this incredible company that you were right in the executive suites of with Michael Eisner and everybody else. And then, of course, the Burgess and the Mouseketeers. So folks can, I don't know, do you have your own website or folks can go?
No, I don't. And I have to tell you that the official Mickey Mouse Club book and the Inside the Disney Marketing Machine. You can go to Amazon, but you'd have to buy a used copy or something, which is great. It's like $5 or something like that. But just put the title in online, and there will be places that you can buy it very inexpensively. And actually, the Inside the Disney Marketing Machine, I'm in the process of working with someone who is going to record it, and it will be on Audible.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, not yet, but probably in a couple of months it'll be. And we're going to change the title so it has a little kind of a newish look. I can't do it, unfortunately, with the Mickey Mouse Club book because that information belongs to Disney.
Okay. Well, the marketing book, you should have the voice be Mickey Mouse, and he'd be like, you know, and then we took over Marvel superheroes. Gosh. You know, like that.
The whole synergy thing is another, interesting chapter.
Oh, my goodness.
The whole Walt Disney company umbrella of, at the time, it was 60 independent businesses, from movies to television to software to this, that, and the other thing, to get to work together toward an end goal for something big movie.
Yeah, it's a blueprint for all of that. Lorraine, thank you very much. I know you're very busy. You're moving, and we'll let you get back to that pleasant task. But thank you so much. It's just so great to see you, and I hope that we can get together in person.
Well, Bill, I can't tell you how nice it is to catch up with you as well, because we had many times together, and you were always one of my favorites because you were always fun to be with and very nice fellow. So. Anytime you might want to do something again with something different, just let me know.
I will, for sure. Lorraine, great to see you. Thank you very, very much. And again, best of luck with everything. Well, now's the time to say goodbye to all our family, including my friend and guest on this episode, Lorraine Santoli. Thanks to our producer here at Brio TV, Phil Hong, who each week saves this podcast from becoming a Mickey Mouse operation. Give it up to BJ Del Conte, Paul Boudra, and all the Crispy Critters, as well as piano man Stephen Dudley, who recorded the music you hear on this podcast. Finally, thanks to you, listener. If you enjoyed this conversation, let us know with a like or a comment at Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Bill Brio. Thanks for listening.